In 2024, the Washington Post reported that there is a trend in corporate America to reduce DEI positions, not the people hired through DEI, but the DEI offices within these businesses, and delegate the work to external consultants. And I don't know about you, but I have about been consulted to death. My current employer uses consultants all the time. Oh, Lord. And these are people who really have no knowledge of our job, what we do, but yet they come out there and they're like, well, this is not how you should do it. Well, then get hired and tell us how to do it. Get hired first. Don't come out of some lab and tell me that I'm doing it wrong. There's only so many ways you can swing a sledgehammer, people. But anyway, I digress. Research suggests that attempts to promote diversity can provoke defensive responses. One study suggested that even incidental allusions to diversity during interviews promoted defensive reactions in applicants. Indeed, after diversity was mentioned, their performance during the interview deteriorated and their physiological arousal increased. So they got angry, as they should, as they should. And in August of 2021, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, approved NASDAQ's proposed rules requiring listed companies to ensure women and minority directors were on their boards or provide an explanation of why they were not. So now we have people in charge of selling stock now telling businesses that they have to have a certain amount of people, a certain type of people on their boards. And the boards now, these are the people who like set the policies of these companies. Dangerous. So dangerous. I mean, wow, you could go into a lot of issues here. A lot of issues. In December of 2024, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit held in Alliance for Fair Board Recruitment v. the SEC that the SEC lacked the authority to approve these rules. And a California judge held in 2022 that a similar board diversity law violated the California Constitution. So now we have two court rulings that say that, you saying that so a certain amount of people or a certain amount of type of people have to be on our boards of our businesses is now illegal. That's precedent. So that's where it goes. So political and public reaction in the US, higher education. Since 2023, Republican dominated U.S. state legislatures have considered bills against DEI efforts, primarily at state colleges and universities. Um, and as we discussed earlier, in June of 2023, the Supreme Court ruled against the use of affirmative action in college admissions, but it did not specifically discuss employers. Um, but there are lawsuits and such things being filed at this time and have been to be reviewed and such about, for employers as well. The Chronicle of Higher Education has tracked over 80 bills introduced in state legislatures since 2023. Of these, 8 have become law, 25 failed to pass, and the rest are pending. Two bills became law in Florida and Texas, and one each in North Carolina, North Dakota, Tennessee, and Utah. Florida now prohibits public colleges from requiring political loyalty tests as a condition of employment, admission, or promotion. The other Florida law prohibits public colleges from spending state or federal funds on DEI unless required by federal law. And let's see. All right, so while we're talking about higher education, let's jump over here to mandatory diversity statements within academia. The use of mandatory diversity statements within academia, that's schools and colleges and such like that, education, wherein an applicant or faculty member outlines their past contributions and plans for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion if hired, has become controversial and sparked criticism. Diversity statements have been a part of some academic hiring processes since at least 2001. So, in other words, if you wanted to get a job teaching at a university, you had to um, state what you had done for diversity in the past and what you were going to do for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion if you're hired. Let's read on because this gets interesting. According to a 2022 survey conducted by the American Association of University Professors, 1 in 5 American colleges and universities include DEI criteria in tenure standards, including 45.6% of institutions with more than 5,000 students. So, in other words, what this says is that um, in order to be considered for tenure, which is in most places, or at least that I know of, if you've been teaching for 10 years, you can earn tenure, which means that they can't really fire you. I don't, I really don't know how I feel about tenure, to be honest with you. Um, for example, the University of California, Berkeley eliminated 3/4 of applicants for 5 faculty positions in the life sciences on the basis of their diversity statements in the hiring cycle of 2018 to 2019. So, because these people didn't have what they were looking for in their diversity statements, they weren't even considered. Doesn't say that they weren't hired because they weren't suited for the job. They probably were or could have been, but they never got to that process because of their diversity statements, because they apparently hadn't helped diverse. I don't know. So, a 1,500 person survey conducted by Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, called FIRE, reported that the issue is highly polarizing for faculty members, with half saying their view more closely aligns with the description of diversity statements as a justifiable requirement for a job at a university, while the other half saw it as an ideological litmus test that violates academic freedom. According to Professor Randall Kennedy at Harvard, this is his statement. Okay. It would be hard to overstate the degree to which many academics at Harvard and beyond feel intense and growing resentment against the DEI enterprise because of features that are perhaps most evident in the demand for DEI statements. Adding, he goes on now, this is some more of his statement. Adding, I am a scholar on the left, committed to struggles for social justice. The realities surrounding mandatory DEI statements, however, make me wince. Several U.S. states have implemented legislation to ban mandatory diversity statements. And in 2024, MIT announced that diversity statements will no longer be part of applications for any faculty positions. So that's so we have a professor who states that he's on the left, which is great, fine, great. But even the requirement of having to have a DEI statement makes him nervous, makes him wince. This is a proponent. This is why I say that these programs have gone too far. When the people who are backing it are, who are a proponent of it, who think it might be a good thing, all of a sudden get nervous. That should tell us something. That should tell us all something, you know? So let's go on because there's more about the education system in here. And then we'll back up and go back to what other things that we were talking about. Um, Equity versus equality. According to the University of Iowa DEI framework, equity is different than equality in that equality implies treating everyone as if their experiences are exactly the same. And again, is that not prejudice or discriminatory? Because basically, what it's saying is that your story doesn't matter because we all have the same story. And we don't have the same story. We don't at all. We don't have the same story. And that statement, in and of itself, speaks inherently why DEI is so dangerous. Because it basically says that just because you're a certain ethnicity, you're automatically uh, discriminated against. And that's not true. That's not true. Or because you're a certain ethnicity, you have preferential treatment. Also, not true. Uh, True. And our stories are not the same. And that's dangerous. To tell somebody that their story is the same as everyone else's takes away their legitimacy, takes away their personal story and their personal experiences. And that's wrong and that's dangerous. And you tell me that it says that this means that these people don't matter. And that's not true. Every person matters. Every person's story is different. Your experiences are not the same as my experiences. And thank God they're not. Because I promise you that there are some people that, with dealing with what I had to deal with growing up and through part of my adult life, would have folded and gone away. I'm thankful that your story isn't the same as mine. Because I wouldn't wish some of what I have gone through in my life on anyone. Even my worst enemy, I wouldn't wish it on. So for the University of Iowa framework, DEI framework, to say that everybody's experiences are exactly the same, that's so wrong. Common identification, especially among critics, is of equality as meaning equality of opportunities and equity as equality of outcome. This difference between equity and equality is also called dilemma of difference. I'm a firm believer in you get what you put in. It's that simple. If you work hard, you'll get the rewards that you want. And if you don't work hard, you're not going to get my rewards. But that's what DEI says is Because I am a different nationality than Aaron, I get the same rewards as Aaron, though I haven't put in the work that Aaron has. It's not right. It's not right. You're not due the same pay as me if you haven't done the same work or have the same experience. It's where DEI goes absolutely wrong. And part of the issue with DEI is its effects on free speech and academic freedom. We're still talking about education here. In the 2020s, high profile incidents of campus conflict have sparked debate about the effect of DEI on the campus environment, academic freedom, and free speech. In 2021, MIT canceled a guest lecture by University of Chicago astrophysicist Dorian Abbott after he criticized DEI programs, but their canceling of his speech led to media attention and controversy. As a result, MIT impaneled a committee to investigate the state of academic freedom at the university. So they didn't allow him to come to speak because he disagreed with their policies. Whatever happened to allowing somebody with a different opinion voice their opinion? I have no problem with you voicing your opinion, and I have no problem at all. But when you force me to, when you try to force me to accept it as truth and as fact, that's where I have the issue. I don't care if you think you're a turtle. I am not going to say that you're a turtle. And in 2023, a former Toronto principal, Richard, oh, I'm going to so butcher this, Bilkstow, led to a new wave of controversy surrounding DEI in the workplace and its impact on freedom of expression. He had fired this principal had earlier filed a lawsuit against the Toronto District School Board um, in the wake of a 2021 incident at a DEI training seminar. He was later diagnosed with anxiety secondary to a workplace event and claimed the session and its aftermath had destroyed his reputation. He doesn't go into detail on what happened. Um, this gentleman's lawyer has publicly linked this incident and its aftermath with his death. And the um, Ontario Minister of Education it said he has asked for a review and that this principal's uh, allegations are serious and disturbing. And it was a anti-racist trainer involved in the incident has stated that they welcome the review by the um, the uh, Minister of Education and said the incident has been weaponized to discredit and suppress the work of people committed to DEI. So that is just about education. 2 pages of information on education and the DEI effects on education. So now let's move on to entertainment and media. In 2020, several prominent actors and directors criticized diversity standards, such as at the Academy Awards, because beginning in 2024, to be eligible for a Best Picture nomination at the Academy Awards, A film must meet two of four diversity standards in order to qualify. 2021, conservative media sources such as National Review have been frequent critics of DEI, with contributor George Leff arguing it is authoritarian and anti meritocratic. And he's right. We can't allow our work to stand on its own, so we're going to force people to accept it and say that they have to accept it, or they're going to be ostracized from public. Going back to the entertainment and media, in 2023, actor Richard Dreyfuss stated the Academy Awards diversity and inclusion standards make me vomit, arguing that art should not be morally legislated. And he's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So then we go on to politics. Thank goodness we got out of that uh, entertainment section, right? In the 2020s, DEI came into the spotlight in American politics, especially in state legislatures in Texas and other Republican controlled states. Several states are considering or have passed legislation targeting DEI in public institutions. In March 2023, the Texas House of Representatives passed a bill with a rider banning the use of state funds for DEI programs in universities and colleges. It's a repeat of some of the other stuff we talked about, so we'll move on from there. Military. Another significant point of political controversy has been the implementation of DEI frameworks in the military, with Republican politicians frequently criticizing the efforts as divisive and as harming military efficiency and recruiting, while Democrats have defended it as beneficial and strengthening. In 2023, the House of Representatives voted to ban all DEI offices and initiatives within the Pentagon and military along partisan lines, with all Democrats and four Republican members also opposing. The Senate, under Democratic control, has not acted. Students for Fair Admissions, which successfully challenged race based admissions in public universities in a 2023 Supreme Court case, sued the military academies after the court excluded those institutions from its ruling. But in April of 2025, U.S. military academies ended affirmative action in their admissions. So they just went ahead and said, you know what, we'll just give up on it. So that's the military, and I've heard the arguments, and I'm not going to argue either way. Um, but that's I'll leave mainstream media and both sides of the aisle to discuss the military issues. Um, and then, of course, there have been public boycotts. Um, Political opposition to corporate DEI efforts in the United States, particularly marketing criticized as woke, have led to calls for boycotts of certain companies by activists and politicians. And some of those being Disney, Target, Anheuser-Busch, and Chick-fil-A. Um, and commentator Jonathan Turley of The Hill has described such boycotts as resulting some success. In other words, they hit the pocketbook, and these companies are like, okay, well, that will end that. So, a June 2024 poll by the Washington Post found that 6 in 10 Americans believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are a good thing. A September 2024 poll by the Human Rights Campaign found that 80% of LGBTQ Americans would boycott a company that repealed its DEI programs, and 19% would quit their job if their place of employment did. Must be nice to be independently wealthy and just quit your job because you disagree with a policy. I mean, I disagree with a lot of policies of my employer, but you know what? I'm still working because I need the money. But here's the thing you have to be careful with when you talk about the results of polls. When places release their polls, they should, to be ethically correct, release the demographic, who they polled, and where, what region of the country they were from. Is the proper and correct way to do that. And the reason being is that, you know, um, and give like the number of how many people were in this poll. But this June 2024 poll by the Washington Post just says 6 in 10 Americans. From where? What group? You're talking about DEI. So was it a diverse group that you talked to? Was it exactly 10 people? That's where the numbers come in, because pollsters will skew their policies and will skew their numbers, and it's not a moral or a correct way to do things. So when you read about polls, you have to be very, very careful, and you have to want to look up those polls, and they need to give that information. If they don't give that information, then that poll should be disregarded. Most people won't, because it'll meet their criteria, and that's on both sides. The right and the left both do the same thing. They do a poll, but they don't tell you how many people they talk to, what the demographic was, and because demographic includes race, sex, ethnicity, because race and ethnicity are different. Look it up; they are. Um, and sexual orientation, and you know the location of where they are, because there are some places that are traditionally more liberal than other places. We know this. I mean, you talk about it all the time. There are some places you don't want to go if you feel a certain way, because that's not going to end well for you. The same as people that think the other way don't want to go into another area because it's the same thing for them. So you have to look at this, and you have to say, you know what? We've got to, we this is what we've got. This is what we've got to work with, and this is what we have to deal with. But they need to give their demographics for their polls. Um, that was one of the things that I learned in my master's degree that I earned in business communications. By the way, I earned that business communications master degree with a 4.0. So I do know what I'm talking about. I am fairly smart, okay? But a 2025 poll by Axios found that more than 50% of Americans across all demographics surveyed said that DEI initiatives had made no impact on their jobs. Of those who said it did have an impact, a majority in almost all demographics said DEI had benefited their job rather than hindered it. Okay, so now they at least mention demographics. They don't give the demographics, at least not in this article. Maybe I'll look that up later, at some point. Um, but at least it does say demographics, whereas the other polls did not, except that it specifically, the Human Rights Campaign of September 2024 poll was specifically to the LGBTQ community. According to the Chronicle of Higher Education, institutions are making defensive adjustments to the criticism. Some schools are removing the word diversity from titles of offices and jobs. Some are closing campus spaces set up for students according to identity. Some are ending diversity training, and some have stopped asking all faculty and staff members for written affirmations of their commitment to diversity. Just wanted to throw in that paragraph. Well, man, we've already talked about the education situation. Now, one of the greatest criticisms of DEI is that actually seems to um, engender anti-Semitism. According to Andrea Spindle of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, anti-Semitism has been largely ignored in the DEI curriculum, and that's true. If you read about it, it's not um, for Jews. It's not being derogatory. That's their name when you're not talking about Semitism or anti-Semitism. They're Jewish people. Okay, that is their ethnicity. That's not being a slur in any form or fashion. And even a former director of DEI from California has criticized DEI for what she says is fostering anti-Semitism. And here's why: because the DEI committee of Brandeis Center at the according to Brandeis Center, the DEI committee at Stanford University. This is a quote from the DEI committee at Stanford University. Said that Jews, unlike other minority groups, possess privilege and power. Jews and victims of Jew hatred do not merit nor or necessitate the attention of the DEI committee. What? Okay, so you say you want diversity, equality, and inclusion, but yet you exclude a group from that. Well, several groups, but you exclude Jews. I can't make this stuff up, people. I can't make this up. This is crazy. And also, um, DEI initiatives inadvertently sideline disabled people, and that's true, very true. And remember earlier when I made a comment about being considered a diversity hire, um, diversity hire, equity hire, or DEI hire are disparaging and controversial labels for persons from underrepresented groups, which are, according to this label, assumed to be less qualified and have supposedly received preferential treatment due to DEI policies. Wording of some DEI initiatives, and this is where it comes back again to the DEI itself, because it's the way they word it, it's the way they post it, and the way they force it on people. It's their own actions that bring about this. It's not the people that are hired through it themselves. That's what the left can't see. And that's what the right doesn't want to acknowledge. Both sides are just as guilty of using DEI. One side uses it to say, because of DEI, this person got hired. And then this over here, they say that you got hired because we, the DEI program, got you that job. At no point is anybody even thinking about the poor person that got hired. What are they thinking? How do they feel? Again, it goes back to that statement earlier that everybody's experiences are the same. Are very, very dangerous. The wording of some DEI initiatives can backfire and contribute to the self perception of the hired person that they would not have been hired solely based on formal merit and have only been hired due to a combination of their underrepresented identity and formal merit. The term diversity hire can refer to problematic hiring strategies such as tokenism. The term DEI, when used as a term to disparage people, has been described as an ethnic slur. The DEI issues, sometimes with different terminology, are of concern in numerous countries around the world. In Japan and Iceland, DEI efforts often concentrate on gender and age equality. India prioritizes addressing workplace biases stemming from the patriarchal system, caste system, and religion. If you ever want to hear of an interesting and very, very strange system, study the caste system of India. Very, very interesting. Very, very prejudiced, but very, very interesting. Many African countries focus on workplace inequality arising from the intersectionality of gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Nordic countries face challenges due to cultural norms like the law of jaunt, which can create a positivity bias and hinder acknowledgement of inequality. So, like Nordic countries face challenges. It's like, we don't have a problem. You can't ignore it. Okay. Um, there are 19 key DEI criteria across 20 major countries. Paid maternity leave, paid paternity, paid maternity leave, and paid paternity leave, childcare costs, hiring quotas for people with disabilities, accessibility regulations in employment, disability non discrimination in employment, same sex marriage legalization, non binary gender identity legal recognition, LGBTQ plus non discrimination in employment, gender quotas on boards, percentage of women in paid workforce, sexual harassment protection in employment, law on pay equity, pay gap reporting legal requirement, age non discrimination in employment, percentage of employment rate for 55 to 64 age bracket, race, ethnicity, non discrimination in employment, nationality, non discrimination in employment, race, ethnicity, data collection allowed and prohibited. That's the 19 points or 19 key criteria of DEI. So that ends what um, Wikipedia had to say about DEI. Interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've been talking for an hour and 35 minutes. So, going through all of this, what we have found by reading this, no matter which way you lean, if you actually listened to the article, listen to this podcast, you can only draw one conclusion and one conclusion only, and that is that DEI is racist by its very nature. Basically, what it says in in its entirety is that the only reason that a person it chooses, and obviously according to which one was that? Uh, what was the name of that business? What was that school? Y'all remember? Oh, Stanford. Apparently, it doesn't include Jews. That it chooses. Basically, it says that the only way that a person it chooses can get a job is to and be treated equally or anything else that it wants is to choose if they make others do it. So they force people to hire these people. And it's not good for that person's mentality. It's not good business sense and it's not the right way to do things. Whatever happened to just earning the job because you're better? You have the qualifications that they're looking for. Whatever happened to that? And I know, legitimately, I know that there is racism in hiring processes. I personally, I personally have been turned down for a job I was qualified for. Actually, more than qualified from the person who did the interviewing. Um, More than qualified for, but I had the wrong skin color. Mhm. That's what I. So, tell me about white privilege because I had the skills, I had the ability. I did. I do. I still do. But that's totally beside the point. I mean, my main concern in all of this, besides the fact that DEI is unconstitutional, and we'll get to that in a minute, is the mentality, the psyche of the person that thinks that the only reason they got a job is because of DEI programs. This is why I say that DEI is racist in its mere use, and it's discriminatory, and it's dangerous because now you've got a person who has a job, but then they spend a lot of their time second guessing themselves. Did I get this job because I'm qualified or because I'm a certain whatever? How dangerous is that? How can their mental capacity be right? You know, I I feel for them. I do, and I feel for people that have to deal with that, and then they wonder why a psychological field is exploding. It's because we're telling people that just because they're not good enough, just because of who they are, or their race, or their ethnicity, or their sex, they're not good enough. So because you're not good enough, we're going to force these people to give you a job. But don't worry about it. Your experience is the same as theirs. Damn, oh my God. It's so dangerous. Why? Why do we think that that is such a good thing? The U.S. Constitution states what criteria is illegal to violate a person's right. The First Amendment, speech and religion. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And DEI, in its very nature, prohibits free speech. You can't disagree with it, or you're labeled a racist. 14th Amendment, born and naturalized citizens. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Section 2. I ain't worried about Section 2. 15th Amendment, race. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. 19th Amendment, sex. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. 24th Amendment, poll tax. They can't charge you a poll tax to go vote. 26th Amendment, age. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. So, any other laws are unconstitutional and therefore illegal unless and until they are made an amendment to the Constitution or they just have to become an amendment to the Constitution. I mean, no other law can stand against the Constitution and be constitutional and be considered a legitimate law. None. Since these amendments cover all the differences that actually exist in the country, then I really don't see why they would have any other amendments. You know what I mean? I know that this has been a tough one, depending on your point of view. And honestly, I really debated with myself about whether or not to do this podcast, but then I decided that it needed to be done, um, because we need to hear a non right and a non left thought of this. Okay. Because the right polarizes you to think that all things are bad, that the left thinks, and the left says that all people on the right are wrong. Then there's those of us in the middle, just like we just want to go to work. We just want to do our thing. Just leave us alone. Okay. So I know this has been a tough one. And please feel free to comment, share, post it. Even if you disagree, feel free to put comments on there. We can have a discussion about it. Um, so so what we've decided, what we've come up with reading through all of this is that DEI programs are unconstitutional because they actually go against the Constitution, because the Constitution has what we can and cannot uh, discriminate against. But there you go. Okay. And they are illegal, and that it doesn't even address the fact that by their very nature they are racist and discriminatory. Maybe not so much racist as they are discriminatory. But like I said, share this, comment, please. Go to my YouTube channel and click like and follow. Hit that little bell so that you get further notifications of videos that I post. And thank you for the and tuning in for the seventh episode of Let's Talk with Aaron Johnson. Bye.